It's August the 13th, 2025. I'm Dana. We got a good show, but we got a big temperature down here tonight, so I'm not sure how much we'll get done. I'm going to start the show off with a song from James Lucid called Less Than a Gram. It's a short song about anti-nuclear, and it's a new song. We'll be right back after that. Hang on for a minute.
Right beside old Unit 3 sits a shell-marked waste, you see. Tanks of resin stacked with care, holding what the pumps caught there. TEPCO field, two plans to show. One says yes, the other no. Each awaits a coming call. Neither clears the path at all. They say when the work might get underway, decommission down the line, mid-century's hopeful sign. 880 tons remain, none retrieved from 3's domain. They debate what space to claim, still the Buildington stays the same. From Unit 2, a careful shot, not from 3, not from 4. Still they work around the door, less than a gram. Still asking for
Hey, everybody. Just kidding. Hello, welcome back. I'm going to be your host tonight. I'm Dana. I hope you're doing well. You can call into the live shows at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. And we got an unusual story for everybody tonight. There's superstars and wannabes and billionaires or trillionaires. I think she's a trillionaire now. She married a billionaire. So in the country she comes from, Isabelle, Isodope, she's a trillionaire, right? She married a billionaire, folks. We know this pro-nuclear person very well. We've criticized her propaganda and lies and deceit and dishonesty many, many times. I'm going to jump in on this screen here now, the big screen for everybody. So 35.8% of Fukushima children have thyroid tumors, thyroid cancer. And used to be 1 in a million. So post-Japan nuclear meltdowns, you're looking at, when you scale it up to 358,000 out of a million children, it means the children are producing radioactive hormones, which regulates every function in their developing bodies. And you can't, that's a gamma, by the way, we're talking about, you can't do that without having equal amounts or more of a bone seeker. So they're producing not just radioactive hormones for the rest of, and they're developing life in the rest of their lives, which is catastrophic. The human bodies, the animals, the species, not designed for that. They're also producing radioactive stem cells. It's the worst case scenario. And so there's many illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies, and your body doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So that's why in Japan, in the first year, in 2012, the year after 8 fuel pools and 4 reactor cores melted down in Japan, 36 reactors total, they successfully covered it up. There was 865,000 extra cancers. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. And cancer is not the only autoimmune disease that you're going to get. There's heart problems, liver problems, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's so many diseases. This is just a few of them. And so in the first year, when you see manifestation of just cancer, the industry doesn't like to acknowledge the other diseases, but clearly we have over 60,000 studies that acknowledge that stuff. Fukushima governor 2012, over 35% of the young people tested have thyroid tumors. These are tumors, these are cancers. And so a child's thyroid is only around 2 by 3 centimeters, an adult is 3 by 5. So a 2 centimeter tumor on a child's thyroid is the width of their thyroid, their entire thyroid. And so can you imagine what's happening to the birds, the mammals, the animals, the species? The 8 million beautiful species now are compromised from perpetual radioactive fallout. This is a study of a spike of 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air, radioactive fallout. The French government, the IRSN, was a spike. So this is not a projection. This is not a conjecture or an opinion, an actual fact. It's an actual fact. And so the whole planet now is compromised just from a single nuclear site, which had on March the 15th, day 4, you had 4 reactors that have lost their inventories. These, Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, it was a brand new reactor. It didn't have any fuel pools. It was a small reactor. Each reactor core in Japan is equal to 100 Chernobyls. They're large reactors. They're pure uranium, pure plutonium. So completely different types of inventory. And after Chernobyl, they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. They closed the freshwater in Switzerland for 30 years. But after Fukushima, they said, And so it's very, very sad to see superstars aligning with the nuclear industry. That's a very sad day when you see stuff like that. Believe you me, that's a little bit heartbreaking. They're supposed to be better than that, right? So 13,646 out of 32,000 or 38,200 children, these are unconscionable numbers when it used to be 1 in a million pre-Fukushima. And so after Chernobyl, 3 million children required treatment. This is permanent. This is Kofi Annan at the United Nations podium in 2000. Many will die prematurely. But anthropogenic man-made radioactive illness or disease or injury, whatever you want to call it, is a lifetimer, right? It's in your body. And just a single atom. There's much more we're talking about here, but just a single atom is in your body, or in animals or birds or whatever. And it's pulsing energy in every direction and like an explosion, almost at the speed of light. And that's destroying chromosomes, cells, and DNA. So your body has to try to repair that every second. It can't keep up with that alone. And it does that with white blood cells. And so it's doing this every second. So now your body attacks the source and tries to repair the damage every second for the rest of your life. It does that with white blood cells. And you're talking about a massive amount immediately being produced, and that's forever. Because your body doesn't recognize man-made anthropogenic radiation because it's not created by the solar system. It's not created by the sun or anything like that. It's not stardust. It's not the elements that our bodies are already acclimated to through genetic superior selection. We call these man-made because they're man-made. Makes sense, right? So there's many studies of the children. 6 in 10 Fukushima children have diabetes. And the head of the Tokyo Medical Clinic said they were expecting that in the Fukushima children from the radiation exposures. Inhaling just one hot particle can cause a cancer, and I just kind of described to you how that works. Your body will attack it for the rest of your life with a white blood cells, trying to build, in your body's terminology, a sarcophagus around the anthropogenic man-made isotope. You can put 200 million of these isotopes in the head of a needle, you can't see it. So it's impossible for you to smell it or see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it. But your body attacks it with white blood cells, and every white blood cell displaces a red blood cell. The red blood cells carry oxygen nutrition. And so there's a cause and effect right away from the radioactive fallout. Now, there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide with decades of reactor cores, because they don't have a repository anywhere on the planet. And they're still splitting atoms directly into the environment. There's no containment. And this is why almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. So it's an insidious industry to line oneself with. And the industry is really good at lulling complacent people into the fold, right? And then weaponizing them against humanity and the species. We have all of the gray whales that are left. 52% have died since 2016, post-Fukushima. And because they broke the food chain with the radioactive fallout. And they broke the food chain, not just in the oceans, but worldwide, fresh and salt water. And so all it's not just the gray whales, or the gray whales, it's all the species of the whales. I have a die-off video ready to go for tomorrow, but we're still in a heat wave, and so I can't, it's like almost 90 degrees here tonight. I just turned the air conditioning off, so it's just a heat wave. And we have a lot of forest fires and everything else going on around us. And so we have, I'm just going to digress for 1 second. So we just carried out 2 research expeditions to bird colonies. The 46 million migratory birds, except for a few 100,000, the rest of them have disappeared. And we know that because we've been studying them hardcore for at least the last 5 years here, and then we had 6 years of doing research expeditions, 4 to 5 months on the Pacific Ocean, as most of you are probably already familiar with. That was a catastrophic event to the Pacific, the 27,000 islands, from British Columbia to Alaska. And so the radioactive fallout has done us all dirty, and everybody's getting sick, but there's so many illnesses and diseases, it's hard to conflate anything with something you can't perceive, right? My Geiger counter, which I should get up and adjust the light, but I might do that. I might get up and adjust that light very quick because there's kind of a little break on the Geiger counter. We'll get it. I'll be right back. I'll get this sorted out. At least you can see the Geiger counter. It's not the best, I apologize. I'm notorious for making mistakes. It's complicated running these shows, right? Okay, let's keep going here. So we got a poll to help articulate the story tonight. And I can't pronounce names very good, should Miss Paltrow, or is Gwyneth Paltrow and Isabelle something, tell Fukushima cancer victims why they're pro-nuclear scum? What am I doing here? Well, yeah, they should tell them. Let's get back on track. The International Atomic Energy Agency. This is quite a frightening statement. Don't mind me, I'm jumping. International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, United Nations, right? They got UNSCLEAR and ERPA and the IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and they're all the same people on each committee. and they all allegedly back each other up. They all support each other, and so they seem like independent organizations, but they're all UN. This is how they manage to take over, and they're setting the policies. So they admitted today there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation, and that the standards that they're using for anthropogenic man-made radiation are based on benefit, not safety. There is no safe levels of man-made, and that's already established, right? Linear, no threshold, for instance. But because the way your body reacts to man-made compared to natural, there's no reaction for natural, and man-made, there's a catastrophic reaction with white blood cells for the rest of your life. And if you get it aggregated in your thyroid, you're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of your life. If it's in your bones, you're producing radioactive stem cells, and your body's not designed for that. Neither is birds or mammals or animals or anything else. And so all the whales that are left, around 13,000 of them, were emaciated, starving to death last year on a migratory run south for 12,000 miles. They had no surviving babies. And to Baja, California, where they have their next generation of babies. The nursery, right? And so when they left there this year for the 12,000 mile north, they're severely emaciated. And we suspect that within a year or two, there will be no gray whales. We're seeing the same attributes for killer whales, for humpback whales, for fin blue whales. We're seeing, and we cover these die-offs extensively. If you go to my playlist, you'll see a big playlist of videos we've already covered. Not all of them, but a lot of them are in that playlist. And I have another die-off video ready to go with over 600 screen captures from the news cycle over the last number of weeks. And we have 2,800 pictures from the research expeditions showing the gannets and the puffins. In the puffins case, we couldn't spot any fledglings, the so-called pufflings. And there's another colony up here of seabirds that we're studying, the kittiwakes and seagulls. They have left the roost. We've never seen this before. Never even heard tell of that before. They left it. They abandoned their roost, which is atypical of a broken food chain. We have no indications of birds feeding on the ocean. If you want to find birds right now, what's left of the 46 million, for the most part, you'll end up going to McDonald's parking lots where they're begging for food. There's nothing at the tide zones. That was wiped out post-Fukushima. So based on having the International Degenerate Agency based their radiation standards on natural stuff instead of man-made, because that's what benefits mean. There is no benefit to anthropogenic man-made radioactive isotopes fallout. And the fallout occurs from the fuel pools at the site. So pretending that in order for Isotope, who just wrote a book, by the way, a pro-nuclear book, she's married to a billionaire. She doesn't need to be evil. She's already sorted out. She's good to go. She married one of the founding members of Airborne. So she's not hurting for money, and she never will be again. And she doesn't need to do something evil. And dragging in Hollywood celebrities who clearly are not aware of the details, the minutiae of the minutiae of radiation, is even a worse again, right? So the tsunami ran right through the site. There was no power for around 1,200 kilometers. So the plants are dependent upon external power. If they don't get the power, these reactors are at 1,000 pounds per square inch already. They need 450,000 one-ton pickup trucks of water every 24 hours, or they heat up even hotter. And so the explosions were from increase of pressure, not from hydrogen. Hydrogen is going to build up, but that wasn't actually what triggered the explosion. It was the lack of cooling. It needs 4,500 tons a minute. It needs 1 million gallons every minute, or it starts heating up. And so that's why the reactors blew up. So many blew up in just the first couple of days. There was over 300 policemen died, we know. And that was basically 2017, 2018 of renal, of kidney failure in the Fukushima prefecture. Their jobs were to keep people out of the exclusion zone, the nuclear wasteland. 3,000 evacuees rushed to hospital by ambulances from shelters in Fukushima, Iwate, and Miyagi. Now, they evacuated people because there was death plumes from the radioactive fallout from multiple reactors detonating and fuel pools detonating. And we know that from, now we've done presentations where we took Harvard University's presentation post-Fukushima in the first couple of weeks, and Yale University, Stanford, I can't remember. We've done them all, but we've redone some of them recently. On the this year's anniversary, go back through my video for the 14th anniversary, March 11th. I actually done around 12, 14 videos, anniversary videos, and 3 of them were where we took the lectures, the presentations from the universities, and they were very long videos because we had to challenge the lies they told, and because they told so many lies, the videos are 3 or 4 hours long. But Harvard University had acknowledged that there was plumes at over 10 sieverts per hour going through some of the local communities that were abandoned. But if they weren't abandoned, and some of them, not all of them were, these would have been catastrophic. 3 sieverts is a catastrophic dose to a human. But we're talking about actual physical particulates that are splitting atoms that was in those plumes. So this story came through the New York Times. I was very confused by that. Why was she on the New York Times? Because she's married to a billionaire. And she clearly got a hate on for our planet and for the species and for the children. And the best way to describe what she's doing is what a serial killer does. And she writes a book of propaganda and then puts it out there and drags in superstars in order to give her a little bit more street creds, because she doesn't have it on her own. She's married a billionaire. She still doesn't have any street creds. And her book is pure propaganda. I haven't read the book. I don't need to read the book. We've covered her for many years. We know these types of people. Her book, Rad Future, The Untold Story of Nuclear Electricity, How It Will Save the World, is out on Tuesday. Well, what I tell you is Rad Future. What I show you and document and provide the documentation for my assertions is the untold story of nuclear. Not hers. Hers is a propaganda. She's not going to put a picture, and I created this picture 10 years ago, 11 years ago. This is just a fraction of the mainstream media pretending they're 150 feet above the stump of reactor 4. She's not going to put that in her book. She's not going to put it in the book and say I'm wrong. She's not going to put it in the book and say it's right. She's going to keep that out of her book. Because if she puts that into her book will no longer be propaganda. It's quite exceptional that she has everything going for her. She's very pretty. She has a career in modeling. Now she's got a billionaire husband, gold digger, to say the least, and a serial killer, to say the best. Terrible, terrible. It's a terrible story when you see people stoop to this level. She doesn't need to produce a book. She's very wealthy, right? Disinformation by nuclear proponents try to confuse the public. That's what she's doing with her book. It's a very, very dishonest thing she's doing. Isabelle Boemeke has a cause that's raising eyebrows. Well, we've been covering her for a very long time. We cover all the stories. Michael Schellenberg, I think, was the guy who put her on a pedestal originally. And his legacy is incredibly dubious. And so calling her a serial killer, because she knows the difference, we've reached out to her. We provided documentation. We've challenged her assertions, and she's been found incredibly wanting. Well, she's propaganda. How the brainwashing was done in Fukushima, and the nuclear industry has 1,000 public relation firms. So being pro-nuclear, coming out as a pro-nuclear or / nuclear influencer, was her first ability to reach out to the population. She got a lot of attention, and she just clung on to that. And that has gotten her a billionaire husband, superstars that are gullible enough to sign on to her and support her and promote her book. And it's a story of heartbreak when people like that actually exist. It's an incredible story of betrayal. And she's not going to do any good. All she's going to do is harm. And that's what got her famous. That's what got her a billionaire husband. There's nothing going to change that. Her book came out yesterday. She's raking in the money, not that she needs it. And what was interesting about this story is Madison Malone Kircher, New York Times, reported this article from Diablo Canyon Power Plant, of all places. So that's quite the bizarre story. What is she doing what is a so-called journalist doing at a nuclear power plant promoting a so-called influencer? The story doesn't make any sense. Unless you have some insight into how the nuclear industry actually works. You have to go see the waste. Did you see the waste? Isabelle Boemeke shouted into the wind, whipped her long hair, dark hair behind her as she stood on the California shoreline. The waste in question was leftover uranium rods they're not left over. They're still incredibly active for millions of years. They're splitting atoms. They have no containment. The ones that are in the cast are vented, by the way, which are stored in thick cast of steel, 50,000-pound cast, and concrete to keep them, at least theoretically, safely away from human beings. We shouldn't use the word human beings. You should use the word person or persons. A human being is actually a derogatory term that was originally conjured up by monarchies to disavow certain people in their family from being able to inherit or gain the throne. And so they were described as a human being, and they didn't have the same privileges and rights as the inheritance of the monarchy, right? But they were still considered royalty, but they were basically excluded, and so they were described as human beings, which meant the law was able to the best way to describe a person is a human being. That's all I'm saying. And that's legally, right? That was Geico versus Watson or something case. And I hate glasses when I get a little bit of grease on them. You can never get them clean again. We'll keep going here in a second. Because I got so many bright lights, it's even worse. We're in a heat wave. Heat wave does strange things to persons. Miss Boemeke once kissed one of the cast. And this was her way of manipulating her followers into thinking that they were harmless and innocuous and benign, right? Let me tell you a story about a place called Hanford. Hanford dumped 450 billion gallons of radioactive sludge. They describe it here as industrial radiological contaminants, but it was actually radioactive sludge from the Manhattan Project. And so 450 billion gallons is hard for somebody to comprehend, I think, is the best way to put it. And so that's equal to an aquarium of nuclear sludge that's splitting atoms, 6 feet wide, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. It was dumped directly into the environment right alongside the Columbia River, which ultimately ends up in the Pacific and feeds 25,000 farms downstream. There was a spot on that river, was at 70 sieverts. It meant that if you were on a boat drifting past it, you would have died that night when your organs would have melted. 450 billion gallons is and she's going to try to tell you in her book that you can fit all the nuclear fuel into a swimming pool, which is absurd as suggested. There's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide trying to contain what they already got. But it's just another one of the industry lies, right? And each pool is boiling off about 120,000 liters a day. And each liter, because the fuel is still splitting atoms for millions of years, is saturated with uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, etc., etc., etc. Very harmful to everything with replicating cells. And it's easy to dismiss me because I'm censored, I'm ostracized, and everything else. I don't get no views, very little likes, very little this, very little that. But if you research the things I'm doing, I'm providing you with an absurd amount of documentation so you don't have to. What you'll find out ultimately, if you're honest, is that I'm a very honest person, and that I'm not misrepresenting or misdirecting anything. I'm trying to give you a comprehensive understanding so you can make an informed decision based on extrapolation, an accurate extrapolation of documentation. And so what I do is run an educational program, very humble, very impoverished educational, because the anti-nuclear has no help. The pro-nuclear gets to marry a billionaire husband, and is published everywhere. My book, I can't get my books published. Ms. Boemeke looks like the heroine of a dystopia novel set sometime into the future. Oh yeah, she's married to a billionaire. And right behind her is Japanese farmers, part of a Pico history. Big smile, got all kinds of gold and diamonds. And therefore she's better than everybody. Therefore, my words don't matter, her words only matter. Therefore, the truth doesn't exist, only her version of it. So, here's a couple of stories I want you to think about. Playing past the parcel with Fukushima. It was 30 million tons of radioactive waste that they picked up. And these are the bags, and you can see them in the background, where farmers are harvesting food in the nuclear wasteland, abandoned zone. And this stuff will poison the daylights out of everybody that eats it forever. It'll destroy their health and their lives. And they're producing 1 billion pounds in a nuclear wasteland. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags, just 3% of the legs. And we know it's for harvest because he's not wearing a paper suit. Not that a paper suit can protect you. So 30 million one-ton bags was $48 billion they spent to lull you into complacency. So you see that chunk of one-ton bags. In 2019, there was 105,000 sites like that. Not like this. The bags are round, not square. They're like that. 30 million one-ton bags, which a lot of it are growing food in it because people stopped paying attention. And the only people that get any traction is the evil people. The children, they're not going to explain to the children. She doesn't care about all these children with tumors. She's not going to put that in her book. She's not going to donate money to the victims. She's going to donate it to the nuclear industry. She's better than everybody. She married a billionaire. She's called Isodope, of all things. A persona she created for her nuclear advocacy work. The nuclear industry has 1,000 public relation firms. Why do they need her? Because the nuclear industry doesn't have, and this is interesting about the nuclear industry, by the way, is that the nuclear industry loves any kind of celebrities or any kind of so-called influencers, which is just a terrible name in this circumstance, because they don't have anybody in the industry that the world recognizes as a good person. And so they're trying to turn her into a good person, and they're using Superstar to try to accomplish that. And nuclear advocacy work, but she's not going to say, look, this is wrong, that they're actually not in that building and that they shouldn't have done it. She's never going to say that. She's not going to say that the building doesn't look like that, they're faking it, and that we have contaminated the entire planet with radioactive fallout. She's not going to say that. She's going to tell lie after lie from the nuclear industry. And she's probably working with Michael Schellenberg today, which is the guy who gave her foot in. On Isodope's Instagram, TikTok pages, Mrs. Boemeke uses familiar influencers, tropes like get ready with me videos, fitness regimes, and beauty routines. So she's trying to appeal to children and the very young, the vulnerable of society, and the victims of society. There's a street in Japan where 7 people dropped dead in the first year in Fukushima nuclear wasteland. She's not going to go there and say how pretty it is. The point is to make nuclear energy appear cool. Well, the industry's been trying to do that. They have 1,000 public relation firms. They have galas, they have all kinds of big hoop-has, and worldwide experts will show up, and all the media will be there flashing the cameras. But they don't have reality on their side, right? They always misrepresent every facet of it. If you owned this supermarket, this was a lady who used to live in that community. And unfortunately, she was convinced to go back there to get her picture taken. It was for a good cause, but there is no good cause to go back into a nuclear wasteland. And she'll get sick from the exposure, from the inhalations. And, if she don't shave her hair and her eyebrows and throw all of her clothes away immediately, she washes it in her luggage, she'll contaminate all of her loved ones' luggage with anthropogenic man-made radiation too. Ms. Boemeke has explained fission and fusion using Legos. And if someone tries to convince me something with Lego, I'm just going to switch off. Because that's a child's tactic, right? That's a really low tactic. That's a pretty despicable. That's what you'd expect to see a serial killer to use, actually. That's the best way to describe an isotope, is as a serial killer. The West Coast was hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain after Fukushima, with a 50 million year half-life. So this was an Ottawa study out of Ottawa, Canada. It was a continuous plume covering the entire planet. And look how bad North America was hit. Now, you're not going to find that on my Geiger counter or anybody else's, like a typical Geiger counter. You need a special system to quantify that. It doesn't have a lot of energy, but it's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second for 150 million years total, 50 million year half-lives increments. There's 10 half-lives. 220 million atoms will saturate the thyroid glands of every insect and bird and mammal and animal and human on the planet, period. And that will lead to all kinds of health issues down the road or right away, depending on how much you consumed of it, washed in it, cooked your food in it, done your dishes in it, your laundry in it. And compared to uranium pellets, now this is very difficult for me to say that somebody would say something like this. And this is why I call her a serial killer. And compared to uranium pellets, which she also calls magic spicy rocks, to gummy bears for scales. It takes an exceptionally sadistic and twisted person to say something like that. If I take one of those pellets, one of the so-called gummy bears, and put it in her purse, both her and her husband would die within 20 minutes. And so would everybody around them. Just from the gamma shines, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays, the X-rays, the alpha shines. How insane have you got to be to like the pellets are splitting atoms, and each atom this is forever, is released into an environment. Once you take it out of the reactor after 14 months or so, put it in the fuel pool, now it's a disease factory. It's perpetually releasing isotopes in the environment. I don't have any celebrities trying to help the anti-nuclear group. I mean, there would be hope if we had that kind of push. We did have one celebrity reach out to me, quite a few years back now, but I don't think it was for good purposes, unfortunately. I talked to her for a couple of hours. She's very smart, I'll give her credit. She asked all the right questions, but she gave me her phone numbers, but I never ever called her back. And she never called me back, so. I was reaching out to, I can't remember his name anymore, because I don't watch TV, I don't watch Hollywood shows or anything else like that. I'm fighting for the species, I'm fighting for the world to have a future. This is a model, this is not a model, but this is a study based on releases from TEPCO's numbers, which excluded most of the reactors and all the fuel pools. But it's Neptunium-239 dispersal based on 20 days of radioactive fallout covering the whole planet. And it's a continuous plume covering the whole planet, so imagine what it looks like in 30 days or 300. It never stopped coming out. Now, Neptunium-239 decays to Plutonium-239. And Plutonium-239 was named after the devil. And I think it's only fair that I explain to you why. And of course, Isotope refuses to acknowledge all the documentation. And she's talking about gummy bears, and it's just why so sadistic? Well, the only thing that makes sense is if you're dealing with a serial killer. Her words suggest that she's a vicious, coward serial killer hiding behind a model. Like Ted Bundy could have been a model too, right? So let me explain plutonium to you. 144 beagle dogs and puppies. Death from the radiation occurred 1.5 to 5.4 years after exposure. Beagle dogs are such sweet animals, they never bite you. They might howl, but that's what they do, but they won't bite you. They're very loving animals. And that's why the scientists use them, right? And they steal them from pet owners, by the way, typically. Not the scientists, but they have contractors who will steal the dogs. Tumors of the lungs, the skeleton, and the liver occurred beginning about 3 years after exposures. So 3 different tumors from plutonium. So it triples your chances of dying. Deaths from radiation occurred 1.5 to 5.4 years after the exposures. And so they had beagle dogs got the big nose, so they had them sniff a little bit of radiation, and then they'd let them live out their life. Because typically they'll sacrifice them / kill them to see where the radiation end up. These particular study from Dr. Raymond Gilmedi, Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico, which is the United States Navy. So bone tumors, here's the breakdown of 144 dogs. Bone tumors found in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death. So the majority of dogs died a very brutal death of bone tumors. It's brutal. You can't get painkillers. Lung tumors found in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death. And liver tumors were found in 20 dogs were the cause of death in only 2 dogs. Occurred later than the tumors in the bones and the lungs. So 3 different tumors from one single isotope. Tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal were competing causes of death. And that the finding in dogs suggests that similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to plutonium. Now, there's a caveat to that, is that the human kidney are at least 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing plutonium. So in other words, you're 50 times more likely to die than the dog. And all the dogs died. Okay. But what's even more frightening about this is that the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods / gummy bears is curium isotopes. They're the major byproduct in the radiated fuel rod. Ignore the alpha emitting for a second. They need lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium. Plutonium killed all the animals. And this plume decays, so there's 10 decays. So if it starts off Neptunium with a 2.5 day half-life, it takes 25 days for it to decay, all of it to decay to plutonium. And as you see in plutonium, and by the way, plutonium-239 is worse than plutonium-238, which is what the studies were based upon. So the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods is curium isotopes, not cesium, not iodine. They're brutal, by the way. Cesium pulses energy 600 feet. But they remain toxic for their entire history, for the legacy. And same with the iodine-129. And what the industry, like, and I can guarantee you that Isodope, Isabelle done this in her book, was claimed that because like these isotopes have a long half-life, then they're equivalent to uranium-308 or something, which is harmless, per se, right? But it's simply not true. This is why we call them anthropogenic man-made. They do conflate them with natural stuff, but it's meant to confuse you and disarm you and make you complacent. Becoming a nuclear energy influencer is the strangest thing I've ever read, besides everything else. So a study from the doctors doing open heart surgery on neonates and infants in 2019 showed congenital heart disease operations rose 14% after Fukushima nuclear accident. It was actually 14.2%. So out of every 100,000 children, live births, complex congenital heart diseases in neonates and infants was 14.2%. 14,200 children need open heart surgery to correct congenital malformations from developing. These are absurd numbers. These are unprecedented, unimaginable numbers. The same as the tumors in the thyroids for children was 1 in a million pre-Fukushima. In the first year, it was 356,000 out of a million. It was 13,646 out of 38,200, right? And their thyroid tumors are thyroids are only 2 by 3 centimeters, and the tumors are 2 centimeters. And all of it was downplayed. Everything I show you was downplayed. And unfortunately, we're the only people on the planet trying to have an actual conversation. Ms. Boemeke says, and I apologize if I butchered her name to her family, but not to her, says she has never taken money from the industry. Well, she's married to a billionaire. If she wasn't married to the billionaire, I bet she should be taking money. Though she has invested in Alva Energy, where's she getting money to? She wasn't a rich model or something. She was just a self-made model, so to speak, that got a following because she promoted nuclear energy. She's a construct of the nuclear industry and a serial killer. I think serial killer first. A startup that aims to add 6 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity to U.S. grid in under 5 years. Like, how are they going to do that? They don't have an application into the regulatory agency, which is over 2 million pieces of paper. And it takes around 5 years for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to hire 400, 500 nuclear experts to go through the application. They're not building anything. They don't have an application into the regulatory agency is the first step. They haven't acquired land. She's investing the money because she's married to a billionaire, and that makes her look good and feel good. And truly one of the most dishonest people I've ever come across. The most deceptive and deceitful. The worst serial killer I've ever come across. We've come across our share. And last fall, Ms. Boemeke donated $5 million. She doesn't have $5 million. Her husband does, but she didn't have it. And pledged an additional $5 million in nuclear causes with her husband. With her husband. That's important to remember that facet. With her husband, Joe Gerby, one of the most prominent members of the Trump administration Department of Government Efficiencies and billionaire co-founder of Airborne. United States government, radioactive material from reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Oh, no, wait, no, Dana, it's like a gummy bear, Dana. We keep things very separate, Ms. Boemeke said of her husband's politics. Well, how is that so if her husband and her donated $5 million to one company and another $5 million to the nuclear causes? She can't keep her mouth shut, but they were lying. As Ms. Boemeke tells us, she is drawn to learning more about the nuclear energy after experiencing climate anxiety in 2019. climate anxiety, climate change is real. I'll explain it to you in a real term, in a real terminology, in an actual sensible explanation of what climate change is. Same as cancer. The cancer epidemic started in the early 70s after a decade and a half of nuclear testing, which was a nuclear war. It's the same radioactive fallout. It's the same isotope. It doesn't matter if it's in anger or testing. So here's what climate change is. It's radioactive fallout covering the whole planet, each isotope, and it's the only emission that covers the whole planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions, which is carbon, means you can't have puppies or birds or animals or mammals or anything or plants or flowers or trees without carbon. We're carbon. Carbon's good. Nuclear industry flipped the script, right? So imagine a snowstorm, Imagine a snowstorm starts in Japan, 20 days later, it covers the whole planet, never stops snowing, and the snow never goes away. Now call it radiation, and now you're starting to appreciate the truth of reality of what has happened. And it doesn't go away for 240,000 years in the case of plutonium. So each atom, and you put 200 million in a heavy needle, pulses energy at the speed of light every second. That's energy. It's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. It's not inert like carbon. Carbon doesn't pulse energy, and it certainly doesn't pulse it at the speed of light, and it certainly doesn't make plumes that cover the planet. Radiation is anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout is the only emitter on the planet that has that particular attribute. You can't see it, but everything on the planet, there's nothing on the planet, no species, none of the 8 million species have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. So this has been going on for 80 years. You have a continuous plume covering the whole planet, absorbed into everything. And you can trace the die-off to the species back to the inception of the nuclear industry. All the nuclear testing. During the nuclear testing, they noticed the salmon stocks weren't returning. They noticed the herring stocks weren't returning. They did recover after they stopped all the testing, but not to the pre-nuclear industry statistics. Same thing with the whale. Our planet would be magic. It would be magic if we didn't have nuclear on the planet. Because there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it, and everything has been contaminated. So you have an invisible plume covering the entire planet for 80 years, pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second. From the upper troposphere to the bottom of the ocean, the bottom of the seas, the rivers, the streams, the lakes, the estuaries, and everywhere else in between. And this kills the bacteria, the fungus in the soil, and that kills the biota, which breaks down the foliage and the litter. And so when you do that, then the foliage and the litter doesn't break down, it becomes tinder dry. Post-Fukushima was a pulse event, and we've seen this acceleration. And so now the plants can't suck up water, the trees can't suck up water. The earth is not holding water, the earth is holding heat. The ocean, we kill the phytoplankton, the bases of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. Within a year or two, most of that was wiped out. This is why we're seeing all the species, the biggest whales, which are dependent upon those, showing up emaciated. So this is a recent picture from Belgium of a killer whale, which eats 340 species that's recognized. It has a peanut head. You can see its shoulder blade sticking out. And the other pictures, you can see its rib cage clearly sticking out. This is emaciation we've never seen before, and certainly not pre-Fukushima. And it's the same thing with the other whales. We're seeing them showing up emaciated. Like I say, I do have a die-off video. I was planning on doing tomorrow, but then the heat waves are going to break on Friday. And so we've been doing shows all week in the heat wave, and I'm exhausted. And I've had a lot of other stress on me, but we managed to get that off my shoulders thanks to you lovely folks. And today was the first day in a long time that I was able to just kick back, so to speak, right? But I couldn't because isotope story, which I was supposed to cover last night, and I'm glad I didn't, because I was really exhausted last night with heat exhaustion. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get a show out tomorrow because the die-off, I might do it on Friday if it's cool enough, because that's really important to me. We got 2,800 pictures. We got to get through some of that from the research expeditions on last weekend. And we have around 600 screen captures of emaciated whales, emaciated birds, emaciated seals, emaciated sea lions, emaciated this, emaciated that, right? Animals starving to death, the extinction event of the insects, etc., etc., etc. These are terrible stories, and the world is sleepwalking now and being bumped into complacency by another book from a pro-nuclear serial killer. It's pretty heartbreaking. They get all the support, we get none. And if it wasn't just for this little handful of people, less than a handful of people support me, I wouldn't even exist. As it is, I need 2 outboard engines for my boat, right? I can't get out and do the research expeditions because my boat's been to Alaska 6 times. And my motor is old, right? That boat, it's like even the Zodiac is smurfed up. I bought another little Zodiac last year, right? But that's not a 90, that's a 150, which is undersized engine, right, for that boat. But I'm on the Atlantic now, and so I need, by rights, I need twin 70s horsepower to carry out research expeditions for the next couple of years. You need a budget, and I've been basically, we have a pretty good operation put together, right? We have a machine shop to keep everything working. We don't have the funds to run it per se. We have enough funds to keep this operation alive, right? And that's what we're going to concentrate on, the educational program. Do the little research expeditions as we can. The species to your left are now exterminated from the Pacific Ocean. We know this because we've done the research for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home by myself, unfortunately. And the gag orders have been arrested, have been shot at, and we still got the research done over 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year. The species to your left are exterminated. They're exterminated. And that's why we went back for an extra 5 years to see if the species to your left recovered. They didn't recover. And so I've been ostracized. I've been hated and feared and scorned. I've been attacked so much. And I'm actually a good person. I'm actually a really good person. I'm a nice person. And I'm a very caring person. And I'm a very worrying person. I'm worried about all the species. I'm worried about all the people. And Isodope is not. She's got $1 billion. Her husband got $1 billion. She don't need to worry about anything, and she doesn't. In fact, now she's going to prosper and further hurt the planet by promoting a book with the help of superstars and an amazing amount of influence from a billionaire to hoodwink and ultimately destroy the planet. They were alleging that the species die off, my research, they died of cancer going from one species to another species to another species. And this is not realistic. They died not because per se cancers, but because of radiation poisoning. Right, because their immune systems are completely compromised. They don't even acknowledge the species again on top of that. And, I went up through 27,000 islands year after year after year to see if the species to your left recovered. It didn't recover. And it's so heartbreaking to see people who have everything out promoting deceit, dishonesty, deceptions, and genocide, like Isabelle is doing. Ms. Boemeke said that the idea to become a nuclear influencer came to her while brushing her teeth during a 10-day fast at a clinic in Spain. Wow, she's such a. Where did she get the money back then to go to a clinic? You sure this wasn't a drug clinic in Spain? In a moment of hunger-induced clarity, which is typical of drug addicts. Extreme increase in mortality caused by cardiac diseases. This is the first year. Death rates might give the creeps to some people, except for Isodope, of course. The number of deaths from heart attacks were up 12.5%, 12,700 people in a single month compared to the same month of any other year before. There was that spike. And the catalyst for all of it, the only thing everything got in common that we talk about is Fukushima, is post-Fukushima. As bipartisan support for nuclear energy gained momentum in recent years, both the Biden and Trump administrations outlined plans to expand nuclear energy in the United States. And last year, 6 more countries joined a growing pledge to triple the world's use of nuclear power. We have the same gigawatts today as we did in the early 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. We have less reactors than we did last year and the year before, the year before, the year before. The industry's going backwards. There's only one company out there with an application into the regulatory agency for the alleged small modular reactor. Well, there's allegedly 2, I guess, now, right? Hitachi. The Canadian small modular reactor is a 24-story building. It's 50 feet taller than the Fukushima's massive reactors. And so they're using the word small modular reactor to try to gain a toehold. And like the solution is geothermal. Geothermal, you can have it all up and running within a year or 2. You don't need nuclear. Geothermal has been ostracized because the minute that geothermal proves that it's a competitor, and Quatsi Electric and a few other companies are going to show that, then it's all over for the genocidal, omnicidal nuclear industry. Uranium pellets / gummy bears. And look at her with a towel around her head in a spot, and that's supposed to be more important than my research expeditions. She's a better person because she got a picture of a pretty girl, and I'm an old man, so I don't count because I'm an old man and I'm scum of the earth, and she's a young, good-looking lady, and then so she's more important. Now she's married to a billionaire, and can you imagine someone like that gaining a toehold influence on our children and the vulnerable of society with her propaganda? It's just not right. It's just not right. And we don't have a way of combating them because we've been ostracized. We don't have the funding. We don't have... Well, the people that fund me is amazing, but we can't compete with them, right? With the people like the billionaire wives, Edwin Lyman, the director of the Nuclear Power Safety, that's a laugh, for the Union of Unconcerned Scientists. These are terrible people. They were created by the Manhattan Project, scientists from the Manhattan Project. These are gatekeepers for the nuclear industry, dressed up as the anti-nuclear. They're the furthest thing from an anti-nuclear. We've covered Lyman probably 100 times over the years. Edmund Lyman has never come out and denounced, neither has Arnie Gunnison or Helen Calicat, which are the pro-nuclear constructs, and Greenpeace, the pro-nuclear constructs, have never come out and every Greenpeace on the planet has barred me on Twitter. And now Twitter got me barred. The truth is a terrible thing, apparently. But I'm just an honest person who's done a stupid amount of work, and my story is unassailable. It's just heartbreaking that the industry, and the reality of it is the industry has all the money they ever needed to have a nuclear renaissance. They can't pull it off. 90% of the money, by the way, is stolen through administration. So how can you reconcile the media pretending they're 150 feet above that building? How does Isodope reconcile that? And then somebody that does the research to write a book, a pro-nuclear book, surely, the goodness, must have watched 1 or 2 of my programs. How can you be in the nuclear industry and not know who I am? In December 2021, Ms. Boemeke helped organize a rally to save the power plant she was visiting this summer afternoon. She's from Brazil, right? Why was she visiting? It was because of Michael Schellenberg was funding her and promoting her, and that's how she got her kickstart out into the cycle. So 35.8% of the Fukushima children have thyroid tumors. These are tumors 2 centimeters or less. And the thyroid gland is 5/3, but not for a child, it's 2/3. And then claiming cancer increases after 10 sievert radiation dose. So Japan is okay with 10,000 millisieverts. This is absurdness to suggest any of that, by the way. A single atom, and you don't measure it in millisieverts, by the way, or microsieverts. You measure it in physical atoms. So, like, the Geiger counter is not up there 308 counts per minute, which would be an evacuation zone pre-Fukushima for a nuclear site. 343 counts per minute. We have high humidity, so we're getting more radiation. Linda Seeley, Vice President of Mothers for Peace, a non-profit organization, has protested against the nuclear power for decades, said the group has filed lawsuits in an effort to close Diablo Canyon. Diablo Canyon is a terrible story. They have one of the most brittle reactors on the planet. These are high-pressure reactors. And because they're on a fault line and they're right on the ocean, it's a very real threat to humanity. And because of the inventory they have there. If nuclear power was clean, if it didn't leave waste that is lethal for the next 240,000 years, we would be fine with it. See, they don't even understand that the nuclear waste is splitting atoms directly into the environment 24 hours a day. Can you imagine just another self-made model all of a sudden get married to a billionaire and she's crazy? She's equating the most lethal element on the planet with gummy bears to deceive and manipulate the kids. She's doing fitness videos and everything to promote nuclear, to drag in the vulnerable of society. She's not trying to have a debate. You won't see her have a conversation. She's not able to articulate it. Somebody else wrote a book, you can be sure of that. Most likely connected to Michael Schellenberg's lot. Her book, Rad Future, The Untold Story of Nuclear Electricity and How It Will Save the World. I will read her book. And I will come out and criticize her lies at some point in the future. I can't afford a book right now. Gwyneth Paltrow, or I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't watch TV, so I never did learn how to pronounce that name. Fitted Miss Boemeke in the Hamptons, posing alongside of Miss Boemeke, holding a, aka serial killer, holding a copy of the book. Because she's a billionaire. She done it because she's hobnobbing with the billionaires and doesn't understand that she's incredibly wealthy. She doesn't need to throw millions of children under a bus of victims and cancer victims and the species. She doesn't need to do that. She's already famous. She already has access to endless amount of celebrities in Hollywood. What she should do as a sign of good fate is donate to my PayPal in the links below. Get somebody else to do it, unless she won't do it with her own account. So I can get 2 outboard motors and get out and research the species die-off so the world can have some real facts. She said, I'm a huge science nerd. She could have called in all of my shows. It's an open call-in show each time. Ms. Boemeke said in an interview in a conference room at the nuclear plant, rattling off facts about waste cast. She should go down to Hanford and tell us how wonderful it is. She should go to Fukushima and stand on Reactor 3 and tell me. So people, like, I understand model closing and they make money, right? This is not what she's doing. She thinks now that she's better than everybody on the planet. She can have any clothes she wants. Husband is a billionaire. She's hobnobbing with celebrities. And that's a serial killer. Her book is meant to destroy the complacent and the vulnerable of society. Earlier, Ms. Boemeke had arrived at Diablo Canyon in a black Sprinter van accompanied by a small team, including her chief of staff, a makeup artist, and a social media editor. I don't have any of those attributes. I'm ostracized. We have this little group of people, and tonight is a tiny, tiny group. 18 people. We have 13 votes. Wow, that's the lowest number I've ever seen, by the way. Should Superstar and Isabelle, Isodope, tell the Fukushima cancer victims why they're pro-nuclear scum? I think it's a legitimate poll. That's a legitimate poll, isn't it? Looks like James Lucid was probably going to write a song about the same. Oh, he's already published it. She kissed a dry Cass. That's hilarious. I love it. That's so good. We'll play that after. It's not going to be a full show. I'm just going to get through this story. Because, look, she told so many lies, it's taken me over an hour just to challenge her propaganda. So imagine how bad it's going to be to try to go through her book. Also in tow was Carolyn. Now, James posted another song last night, believe it or not, which is absurd, because he posted one before the show and he had another one ready to go, and he posted it after the show. But I was a bit emotional last night, if most people probably know. And I just put on a song because I couldn't do any more video, right? It's very unusual for me, by the way, to be that way. But it was a lot of stress came to a boiling point for me yesterday, and we got a lot of things solved. And I'm in a better shape again today. Like, I got no intentions of ever stopping. If the world will let me continue to fight, I'll fight with every fiber in my body every day. I was built to do it. Also in tow was Caroline Porco, a planetary scientist, a nuclear advocate who posted online about nuclear energy, caught Mrs. Boemeke's eye a decade ago. She'll line herself with the scum. It's just, she doesn't need to. She's a billionaire now. Jacopo, a nuclear scientist, engineering professor at MIT, the lowest of low, said he had got to know Ms. Boemeke after virtually meeting her during the pandemic. And he's the director at MIT Center for Advanced Nuclear Energy Systems. How come he never introduced himself to me, I wonder? How come he's never come out and challenged my assertions, I wonder? The director at MIT Center for Advanced Nuclear Energy Systems said in a phone interview that he was struck by the billionaire's curiosity. Her style is great for her intended audience. Her style is great. Her propaganda, her deception, her deceit, her dishonesty, her disingenuous, her serial killer. She's a serial killer. The typical MIT professor is a serial killer. She's one too. They recognize each other. Ms. Boemeke, like some nuclear proponents, he said, had probably provided an alternative telling of the Chernobyl disaster. There is no alternative telling. There's the truth, the facts. And if you go back through my presentations and find a Chernobyl anniversary, there's 2 Chernobyl anniversary presentations I've done on this particular site. And there's around 900 academic studies, and it gives you insight of the things they study from radioactive fallout. They study everything, and everything is a lot bigger than you might think. It's really something to see the studies. Ms. Boemeke version of Chernobyl is nobody should have left, the children were fine. She's soulless, a heartless, and a cold-blooded killer. It's a serial killer. She has all the attributes of a serial killer, hidden behind a mask of a model, just like Ted Bundy. She's no different than Ted Bundy. She's just a coward, won't do it with her own 2 hands. In Rad Future, Ms. Boemeke argues that while Chernobyl was not a glowing success story for nuclear energy, avoiding nuclear energy because it makes much sense as avoiding cruise ships because of the Titanic. Every nuclear power plant, you traitorous human being, every power plant on the planet is full of fuel pools with no containment, splitting atoms into the environment, and every nuclear power plant, except for a few, is surrounded by farms. It's an agenda to poison everybody on the planet, and ultimately every species, and they're well on their way. She's the very furthest from a good person, and she doesn't have the genetic makeup to be a good person. She has the genetic makeup of a serial killer, but she's a coward who won't do it with her own two hands. And even worse, she does it with a book and behind the guise of being a good person is not a good excuse. And James Lucid has posted a song about her. That's so funny. Also, he didn't know I was doing this tonight. And so he's got a song out of her, and the song is called Kiss the Cass or something. We're going to play it here in a minute. That's it for the show tonight. I'm actually sweating here. And so I'm not going to do a show tomorrow night. And I'm supposed to do the die-off species show tomorrow night, the whales, the birds, the animals, the insects. I got that queued up ready to go. It's a difficult show. It's probably a 3 to 4 hour, maybe 4.5 hour show. We also have 2,800 pictures from research expeditions last weekend of the gannets colonies that's left and the puffin colony. The only fledgling we've seen at the puffin colony, we've never seen any puffins coming back with food in their mouth to feed the pufflings, the baby puffins, the fledglings. But there was one, and where the mother comes back and lands, has no food, goes in the nest and brings out the baby, which was really tiny, way tinier than it should be, and has it by one of the wings, and just tosses it. The baby wasn't wiggling or fighting. I guess it was already dead, right? That was the only fledgling, and it was that we've seen. Now we know the puffin colony failed in 22 and 23, and that they relayed their eggs in the fall, which we've never seen before. They had no surviving babies. Well, the New York Times, boy, they can sure write them, can't they? And so Hollywood superstars coming out and promoting disease factories and death machines and extermination machines will come back and haunt her forever, I can tell you that much. She needs to distance herself from serial killers like that creature right there, who unfortunately we've had to come out and challenge her assertions too many times. James has just posted a song. She kissed a dry cass. She's talking about isotope. That I'm pretty sure that's what that show is about, is isotope. That's so awesome, man. I can't wait to hear it. We're almost there. Yeah. Now, I love the fact that me and James put out, I done a show on her, now James got a song that is going to immortalize her. What could be better than that? Seriously, what could be better than that? Okay, hugs for everybody. And thank you, everybody that supported me over this trying times. And I'm actually going to go pick up groceries. There's some groceries tomorrow. It breaks my heart to spend any money, but I got to go pick up groceries. And it's been pretty rough. Bills come first, food comes later. Isodope doesn't have to worry about it. Her husband's a billionaire. She doesn't have to worry about me. She doesn't have to worry about anybody. She got celebrities coming at her, trying to... It's just sad. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Hugs for you and your friends, your families, your loved ones, your pets, your neighbors, your friends, and everybody else. I'll catch you on the other side.
She kissed a dry cast down at Diablo Canyon.
I gotta start that again. That was hilarious. She's kissing a dry cast. I'm gonna adjust the volume. My apologies. You can go over to James and you won't get the screw up that I made. Here we go. We'll try it again. Take care. Have a great night.
She kissed a dry cast down at Diablo Canyon. Made the waste her fashion companion. She kissed a dry cast just for the clicks. Brought a smile and influencer tricks. She kissed a dry cast down at Diablo Canyon. Made the risk a runway companion. She kissed a dry cast just for the clicks. Red future smile and influencer tricks.
That was hilarious. The gummy bears and all, James. Way to go, bud. Good night, everybody. Take care.